Stop whatever you're doing for 1 second and just listen. Not to me, to the room you're in. The hum of a fridge, traffic outside, your own breathing. Now imagine that sound organized, compressed into a rhythm, shaped into a melody. Something changes in your chest before your brain even knows why. Here is the part that should bother you more than it does. Every single human culture ever documented, every isolated tribe in the Amazon, every Arctic settlement, every desert nomad who never once made contact with the outside world, makes music. Not sometimes, always. And evolutionarily, that makes almost no sense. Music burns calories. It takes up time that could be spent hunting, foraging, building shelter, watching for predators. It doesn't feed you. It doesn't keep you warm. By every cold, practical rule that shaped human survival, music should have been selected out of us 100,000 years ago. It wasn't. It did the opposite. It became one of the only human behaviors, with zero exceptions, across the entire species. So either evolution made a mistake, it never bothered to correct, or music was never a mistake at all. It was a side effect of something else our species needed so badly that the accident became permanent. Today, we're going back roughly 50,000 years, to a cave, a hollowed-out bone, and a rhythm nobody planned. To figure out how a species obsessed with staying alive ended up inventing something that does nothing but make us feel. This is how humans accidentally invented music. Before we go back into that cave, if you're the kind of person who wants to understand not just what happened in human prehistory, but why it happened, why our brains are wired the strange way they are, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. This channel exists to dig through exactly this kind of question, and we go deeper into it every single week. All right, back to the cave, long before humans had a word for danger, or food, or love, we had sound, pitch, rhythm, tone. And here's the theory that changes how you think about language itself. Many researchers now believe music and language were never two separate inventions. They were one system, splitting slowly in two. A theory sometimes called musalanguage. Picture an early hominin mother trying to calm an infant with no shared vocabulary between them. She doesn't have words yet. So she does what every mother on earth still does instinctively today. She hums. She rises and falls in pitch. She repeats a rhythm. Researchers call this infant-directed speech, and it shows up, unlearned, in every culture studied, structurally identical in its exaggerated melody, whether the mother is in Norway or Papua New Guinea. Now picture a hunter trying to signal his group without alerting prey, mimicking the pitch of a bird call across open ground. Same raw material. Two different uses over tens of thousands of years, that single proto-communication system pulled apart. One branch kept chasing precision, specific meaning, specific reference, specific facts, and became what we now call language. The other branch kept chasing feeling, pitch, rhythm, emotional contour, the parts of vocal communication that carry mood rather than message, and became what we now call music. We didn't invent music from nothing. We kept the emotional half of our oldest communication system and simply never turned the volume down. So how did humming and mimicked birdsong turn into actual instruments, objects built for the sole purpose of making sound? The honest answer is almost anticlimactic. It was very likely an accident of tool-making. Early humans were already obsessive about material. They struck stone against stone constantly, testing weight, shape, and edge for tools that could cut, scrape, and kill. And in that endless striking, someone inevitably noticed that certain stones didn't just chip, they rang. A particular density A particular hollow chamber inside the rock produced a tone instead of a thud. Stretch a hide tight across a wooden frame to build a shelter wall, and you've accidentally built a drumhead. None of this required anyone to think, I am now inventing music. It required only that someone notice a sound was interesting, and do it again. The physical proof that this experimentation eventually became deliberate is sitting in a museum case in Germany right now. In a cave called Hohle Fels, archaeologists recovered a vulture's wing bone, hollow and light, with 5 holes drilled into it at carefully measured intervals. Not randomly spaced, but positioned with enough precision that when researchers built a working replica, it produced a clean, controllable musical scale. This object is roughly 40,000 years old. Whoever made it wasn't fumbling. They already understood the relationship between hole spacing and pitch well enough to execute it on curved bone using stone tools, which means the musical concept behind the flute is considerably older than the flute itself. And there's an even more unsettling contender. At a site called Divja Babe in Slovenia, archaeologists found a cave bear's thigh bone with a row of neat, spaced perforations, dated to somewhere between 50 and 60,000 years ago, a period that places it not with modern humans, but with Neanderthals. The find is fiercely disputed. Some researchers argue the holes are simply puncture marks left by a hyena's teeth. But if the Divja Babe bone really is a flute, it means music didn't start with us. It means an entirely different species of human was already turning bone into instruments before our lineage ever picked up the idea. Either way, the pattern is the same. Music didn't arrive with a plan. It arrived with someone noticing that a hollow object, struck or blown a certain way, produced something worth repeating. Here's where music stops being a curiosity and starts being a weapon of survival. Because rhythm does something melodies alone doesn't. It physically synchronizes the bodies of everyone who hears it. There's a documented phenomenon called rhythmic entrainment. Expose a group of people to a steady beat, and their bodies will begin moving in time with it, often without any conscious decision to do so. It's not unique to us either. Parrots, cockatoos, and sea lions show the same involuntary synchronization to rhythm, which tells us this isn't some sophisticated cultural invention. It's wired deep into how brains and bodies interact with pulse. Now think about what synchronized bodies are actually good for. Rowing together, hauling something heavy together. Grinding grain in rhythm, so nobody's motion collides with anyone else's. Groups that move as one unit are simply more efficient than groups moving as scattered individuals. And rhythmic vocalization, chanting, singing, drumming while working, is one of the most reliable ways documented across human cultures to force a group into that kind of unity. A tribe that could coordinate its labor through rhythm had a real material edge over a tribe that couldn't. That's not a poetic explanation. That's a mechanical one. But rhythm's real power wasn't in the fields or the hunt. It was in the bond it built between the people using it. And this is where the biology gets genuinely strange. When people sing or drum together in a group, not alone, but together, researchers have measured a spike in endorphin release, the body's own natural painkiller, at levels significantly higher than when the same people listen to music passively by themselves. Endorphins are the same chemical pathway triggered by physical touch and grooming, eventually stop, which is the exact bonding mechanism our closest primate relatives rely on to hold their social groups together. The anthropologist Robin Dunbar has argued that music functions as grooming at a distance, a way to deliver that same chemical bonding effect to 20 people simultaneously through one shared song. instead of needing 20 separate one-on-one physical interactions to get there. In a species whose survival depended entirely on group loyalty, that is an enormous advantage. A band that could bond 20 members in the time it took to sing. One song could out-cooperate, out-trust, and outlast a band that had no equivalent tool. Evolution didn't need to select for music itself. It only needed to select for the unity music happened to create. And the individuals and groups who stumbled onto that trick simply survived better than the ones who didn't. There's one more accident worth sitting with, because it's one of the strangest pieces of evidence in this entire story. When archaeoacousticians, researchers who study the acoustics of ancient sites, went into decorated caves like Lascaux with sound equipment instead of cameras, they found something nobody expected. The paintings weren't scattered randomly across the cave walls. They clustered disproportionately in the spots where the cave's natural acoustics were the most powerful, where a single voice would echo, resonate, and seem to answer back from the stone itself. Nobody planned this. Early humans exploring dark cave systems almost certainly stumbled onto these resonant chambers by accident, made a sound, and heard the rock respond in a way that must have felt genuinely uncanny. And it seems they didn't just notice it and move on. They returned to those exact spots to paint, to gather, to perform. A completely accidental discovery about the physical properties of stone became one of the founding locations of ritual and art. So, why does music still do this to us, tens of thousands of years and zero survival pressure later? Because music hijacks the same neural reward circuitry that governs food and reproduction. The dopamine pathway that exists specifically to make you crave things your body needs. Music engages that circuitry through prediction. Your brain, listening to a melody, is constantly forecasting what note comes next, based on the patterns it has absorbed over a lifetime of listening. When a song sets up an expectation and then satisfies it, or better yet, delays it just slightly before delivering the payoff, your brain rewards you with a dopamine hit for guessing correctly. That's the actual mechanism behind a chill moment in a song, the goosebumps, the drop that makes a crowd erupt. It is a learned prediction system, triggering a genuine, involuntary physiological response. And that kind of deep integration into the brain's emotional and reward architecture doesn't happen to a skill picked up casually. It happens to something the brain has been shaped by for a very long time. So, here's a detail that makes all of this even harder to write off as cultural coincidence. Researchers led by Samuel Mayer played music from 60 small-scale societies around the world. Recordings from cultures with no exposure to each other's traditions whatsoever, to listeners who had never heard any of them before. Those listeners were still able to correctly guess the song's social function far more often than random chance would allow. They could tell a lullaby from a healing song, a dance track from a love song, purely from the raw acoustic shape of the sound, with no shared language and no shared culture to lean on. That means something about the connection between certain sound patterns and certain human situations isn't culturally taught. It's built in. Somewhere underneath every regional scale, every instrument, every genre humans have ever invented, there's a shared acoustic instinct that every human brain seems to arrive already carrying. Which is exactly what you'd expect if music's roots go back further than any single culture, tribe, or even species. There's one more thread worth pulling, because it might explain why music didn't just survive as a social bonding tool. It got dramatically more elaborate over time. The psychologist Jeffrey Miller has proposed that musical skill functions the way a peacock's tail does. a costly, difficult-to-fake display of underlying quality. Learning to sing well, play an instrument with precision, or improvise on the spot takes enormous cognitive control, breath control, memory, and coordination. And all of that is expensive to develop and nearly impossible to fake convincingly. In a species that pairs off and raises offspring cooperatively, being able to demonstrate that kind of underlying capability, stamina, coordination, creativity, discipline, became its own kind of advertisement. It's not a coincidence that musical elaboration tends to intensify precisely in social settings where people are performing for each other. The accident of music may have started as coordination and bonding, but it kept getting more complex because the individuals who could do it best had something real to gain from showing it off. So, how did we accidentally invent music? Piece by piece, and never on purpose. A mother humming to quiet an infant, a hunter mimicking a bird call, a hand striking a hollow stone and noticing the ring instead of the crack. A group of bodies falling into rhythm because it made their labor easier. A cave that answered back when someone dared to make a sound in the dark. None of these people were trying to invent an art form. They were noticing that certain sounds felt worth repeating, and repeating them until tens of thousands of years later, a species descended from them was carving precisely spaced holes into a vulture's wing bone. Music was never a reward evolution planned to give us. It was the accidental byproduct of everything we actually needed to survive. Communication, coordination, bonding, and belonging. Bundled together into something that, somewhere along the way, started to feel like magic. So the next time a song gives you chills for no obvious reason, understand what's actually happening. You're not just enjoying a melody. You're running a 50,000-year-old survival mechanism that never got switched off. If this changed the way you'll listen to music tonight, hit like and share it with the one person you know who can't survive a car ride without their playlist. And tell us in the comments, what's the one song that makes you feel most human? Thanks for watching Half Evolved. I'll see you in the next one.